This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason, to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raj Schaefer.
Welcome to the How to Run for Office podcast from My Campaign Coach. Our guest this week is the youngest member of the Texas State House of Representatives. Briscoe Cain has a clear path to re-election in November, so he'll be back for his second session in January, and I'm sure he'll be fighting as hard as ever. Today he joins us to talk about how he got there, what motivates him, and why more of us should get into the fight. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to Donna, who took our free online course last week, and just a day or so later, she purchased the Advanced Candidate course. I've packed about 13 hours of video, not even to count the presentations, templates, downloads, and tools that are in that course, and I'm confident it's going to upgrade your campaign game. Do what Donna did and check out the free online course first. It's about determining if you're ready to run for office. Should you run and can you win? Then, if you like what you see, consider purchasing the Advanced Candidate course for just $49 per month or $249 for lifetime access. In the interview ahead, you're going to hear Briscoe talk about the lessons he learned from losing his first race. These courses are built to help replicate a lot of that learning without having to first experience the loss. And I guarantee there's no better investment you can make in winning your campaign than taking these courses. So visit learn.mycampaigncoach.com to find out more. All right, let's get to the interview and get to know Representative Cain. He's a native of Deer Park, Texas, from a family with roots in our great state tracing back to the signing of our own Declaration of Independence. As you hear in the interview, he describes himself as a conservative Republican who supports limited government, less regulation, increased transparency, the value of life, and traditional family values. Briscoe first ran for state rep in 2014 and lost that race. Through the interview, we discuss in detail what he learned from that contest and how he was able to leverage those lessons to mount a successful campaign against an entrenched incumbent just 2 years later. Most importantly, Briscoe is a loving husband and proud father of 4 boys. Like myself, he married way out of his class, and we talk a lot about how important a strong marriage is to being effective in the public arena. Enough for me, let's get to talking to Briscoe. Representative, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on.
Hey, Raz, I love your show.
Thank you, sir. It's always good to have listeners, and I appreciate you being one of them. I've known you for a couple of years now. Before you first ran for office back in 2014, you were heavily involved in Texas conservative politics, especially around issues of life and working the pro-life movement. And so we kind of got to know each other, and then through Luke Macias and some of the folks that we just kind of run in the same circles. And so we've got to know each other better over the last couple of years. And I'm excited to have you on here because you're the youngest. Again, you're the youngest member of the Texas State House, 33 years old, and you came in, I guess, at 2 years ago. It was barely 30, and I want to hear from you today about a lot of what brought you into politics and what you've been able to accomplish, and kind of what's made you a lightning rod in certain areas. But let's start out. How'd you get involved in politics? Where do you come from? Tell us about your family and bride and kiddos. Just get to know you a little bit outside of politics first.
Okay. Well, I'm from Texas, right? So some may recognize my first name as being a good Texas name. About 7 generations removed, though, from the former Governor Dolph Briscoe, and we don't have any of his money. And there's a kind of a small county up there in the panhandle of Briscoe County where about 1,200 people live. It's kind of something that really motivates me. Texas focused. When I'm kind of even reading news and focused on politics, it is strictly Texas. Some people we find talking about a lot what's going on in D.C., but I feel like if you want to know really what's going on in Texas and be really well studied on it, you cannot be an expert in both. So I try and keep up with what's going on in D.C., but really kind of focused here. I've got four boys, by the way, four boys, nice. 5 and younger, with the youngest being almost 3 months old right now, all named after Texas counties. That was kind of a plan my wife and I came up with, and it's worked. So we've got Briscoe the 4th, Walker of Walker County, would be named after Samuel Walker of the Walker Colt manufacturer, Crockett little known Texas hero, and the newest one being Maverick, Samuel Maverick, which the adjective being a maverick is actually named in honor of a Texan. Story goes that he refused to brand his cattle, and thus they were mavericks. I got involved in politics, man, because of the pro-life issue. I was at a kind of a young adults conference called One Thing. It's a kind of a young adults evangelical conference they put on in Kansas City. And it was there that abortion and the reality of abortion, because of a booth that I kind of went by, that became just really, really real to me. Growing up in the church, it was either it wasn't talked about or I wasn't paying attention. It's possible the latter, that the atrocity and the sin of abortion wasn't really on my radar. And it wasn't until kind of I began to learn more about it that I realized I felt compelled to do something. And at that kind of time period, I was working at a law firm as a runner. It's kind of a gig I actually got off of from a posting on MySpace, that social media platform that no one really uses anymore. I never thought I'd be in law.
Forever ago.
Yeah. And so I learned about abortion, and I'm in law, and I really feel this kind of pull that I should do something about it. And it was like, well, the problem seems to be in courts and with lawyers, and why don't I become one so I can fight this evil? So that's exactly what I did. I just go to law school, started the first pro-life law student organization this side of the Mississippi. Now there's a bunch of them, and really just spent all my time. It just took up everything in me. All I did was just read cases and study and learn and get connected. And you'd find, about a few years ago that when David DeLayden got indicted in Harris County, he sent me a text message literally an hour later and said, let's release the documents. And so what that is before that, I was right out of law school. I became the Texas legal counsel for an organization called Operation Rescue. A lot may have never heard of them before, but they are the parent organization for the Center for Medical Progress, which is the organization that was releasing the videos, doing the undercover work. And David and I had done some Public Information Act requests, which a lot of activists use. We did them of the Texas medical schools. And what we'd found is 4 medical schools were using your taxpayer dollars to purchase baby parts. And we were able to link the Planned Parenthood in Houston selling baby parts to University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. And eventually we got those documents to Congress, and the Congressional Subcommittee recommended criminal charges against them over that. And that's just kind of some of that element of that activism, which grew out of just pure necessity, realizing that if no one else was going to do it, why not me? Instead of just sitting around and waiting for somebody to do it.
And for folks that are listening, what you're referring to is back, I think it was primarily like during the 2016 and 17, there were a number of videos that came out through David and the Center for what was the name of the Center for Medical Progress?
Center for Medical Progress.
Yeah. So CMP put out these videos, and there were a lot of undercover videos talking with abortion providers and people from Planned Parenthood, a number of affiliated organizations, discussing the sale of baby parts. Right?
Yeah, my favorite thing when the news gets a hold of the invoices and purchase orders that we release. And I still think, even on my Wikipedia page, there's someone wrote a section about it, and it's like allegedly showing Planned Parenthood selling baby parts. Like alleged, there's the purchase orders and invoices. What is the? It's a receipt for money. What do you mean alleged? These are baby parts. It's amazing how the left is, but. That's kind of just some of it, and I've served on some crisis pregnancy boards. We're actually one of the oldest in the state of Texas in Houston, considered one of the founders of our pro-life movement. Her name's Margaret Hotze, of the famed Stephen Hotze's mother. And again, it comes from, and I think that's kind of part of the show for you, is to encourage people to do something.
Right.
And we are fully equipped with that. All you got to do is just take action. You figure it out. Ask people for help. When you see a problem, do it. And we're all busy, but hey, a little less sleep is okay. it's worth it.
That's right. Just inject some discipline in your life, kind of come back to sleep a little bit, eat a few fewer donuts, just get out there and get some things done.
In summary, it was abortion that kind of brought me out of the comfort zone into the political world. And then, of course, then began to learn about other issues and really kind of realizing how the government was just completely out of control. And that not only if it could, violate our right to life, that it then is violating our right of self-defense, right? The first law of nature being the right of self-preservation, and our taxes and our money and our treasure and just our personal liberties. And the more you continue to get informed and see these things, you start realizing how the frog has been boiled, and it's amazing that we continue to tolerate this kind of tyranny. But I think people are continuing to wake up. Thankfully, to social media, we've got a lot of fake news out there, and some people don't know the truth. But at the same time, and the same element, there are a lot of people that are waking up and realizing that something must be done, that we must take the government into our own hands, that we cannot wait on government to act. And sometimes when I say things like that, people will say, "Well, Briscoe, you are in the government." I have to explain, no, I went into the government to correct it. You got to really be very careful not to allow it to make you part of it and to become part of that creature that is the issue. But gosh golly, good people must enter this realm, whether that's through elections or helping campaigns or being activists or writing blogs or having podcasts like you do, to raise awareness and do something, hold people's feet to the fire. Because when light is shined, those roaches run.
That's for sure. And so for your case, you're saying that you got involved through the life issue. You learned so much about that and got further involved. I think that from a listener's perspective, that's really important, because I think some people don't get involved because they can't they don't see how their strategy and their plan gets them from on their couch to being a rock star, being elected, or being famous, or having some kind of large impact. And in your case, what you did was you just said, "Hey, I want to do something. I don't know what I can do or what the limits of that activism or that engagement are, but I'm going to do something, and we're going to see how that grows over time."
That's exactly it. You've got to just get out of your comfort zone. I think that's maybe the issue for a lot of people, is they feel uncomfortable. They're not gifted at speech or at writing. Guess what? Neither was I. It came from practice. I still get nervous when I'm talking in front of people. The amazing thing, though, is if the Lord's there, right, He will guide you. He's just waiting for us to step out in faith, to believe that He's sovereign in our lives, that He's put this mission in our hearts for a reason. And regardless of how you feel equipped or educated, if you just start walking in faith with that, He honors that faith, and we'll find ourselves put in situations and amazed that, wow, He designed this from the beginning. He may not have shown us the end, but He begins to continue to light that path and connect us with the right people and put the right words in our mouths.
Yeah, there's been plenty of times in my career and just life as an activist and being involved in politics where I've, guys open one of those doors. I've got an opportunity through working hard and just keep my head down, and I'll be like, "Holy crap. How in the world did I get here? What happened?"
And thankfully,
it's crazy.
I say thankfully that the Lord didn't show us the end.
Oh, no kidding.
Right? If He showed you the end, you'd have totally been freaked out.
Yes.
Right? And like, I don't know about that.
Well, and even in our case, I mean, we're early 30s. If He'd have just shown us to this point, not even the end, because we're just getting started, but if He'd have just shown us a couple years later what was going to be involved, I'd be like, yeah, there's no way I can do that.
Yeah, I don't know if my wife would have married me. She'd have been like, what am I getting into? Because the attacks and the mail that hits the house and the media and the news reports. But no, she's a great spirit and really wouldn't be able to do it without her. Gosh, it was, in fact, we met kind of when I was first getting started in the pro-life movement, and she saw it as well. And I guess sometime maybe the Lord revealed something to her that I didn't know, that I was going to need her as someone to lean against to keep supporting me in this. Because as you know, it's not easy when you are being a disruptor, when you go against the flow.
I mean, I think even for those that, even for the folks that do go with the flow, it's still not easy as far as home life and juggling, but especially if you're going to go in there and you want to change things. You want to do what folks like yourself and a lot of our other friends in the Freedom Caucus are trying to do in the State House. there's a high price to be paid. There's a lot of people that really love you, and there's a whole lot that really want to just drive you into the dirt. And having a spouse that supports you, that believes in what you're doing, and is a true partner in that effort is critically important.
There you go. So I would tell people when they are getting kind of flack, and they're realizing they're above the target, to take it as a compliment, as a sign that you're in the right location. We are promised to suffer with Christ, and while this may not be identical to that kind of suffering, it reminds us, say, we are not of this place, and that you're doing the right thing. It can be a difficult thing because when people are getting started, they'll get attacked maybe, or if they were to go to a city council meeting or a school board meeting and they were to speak up, you've got these 5 or 6 people up on this dais and they're sitting up above you, and it's very nerve-wracking and intimidating. And let's say they reject everything you say, even though you know in your heart that whatever that proposal that city council is going to do, whether it's annexation or some increased taxation, or whether they're wanting to build a water park with your tax dollars, and that can be scary because there's these lobbyists and your neighbors are all going to hate you for speaking out. To learn how to, allow that to be evidence that you're actually doing the right thing. You got to put a different kind of glasses on, and allow that to actually be encouragement. And so maybe that's just a psychological trick I've had to learn as an adaptation, not to be nervous about it. But I would say that's kind of a technique for an activist to learn how to avoid being intimidated.
So looking back as far as your comment about your relationship with your wife and how that you guys kind of started getting to know each other and first met being involved in the pro-life movement, how did that impact in your family life? How did it impact you getting involved and run for office? I mean, your 4 boys are all under 5. You got involved 4 years ago. So you've been having kids and having young kids at the same time as you're running for and getting involved in serving in public office. Man, that's tough. That's tough even without the kids. That's tough without young kids. Talk a little bit about how y'all's relationship, how you talked about that, how that's grown, and what it's been like being a young dad getting involved in this crazy world of being an elected official.
It must have been 10 o'clock or so last night. I'm holding the newborn, the 3-month-old. And it's one of those tenderest moments, and he's sleeping. And of course, I'm just thinking, wow, these times fly. They're only this size for so long, and how much time that I've missed with the others. Whether that was, I had my first while I was in law school, and of course, anyone who knows about that grad school is very, very busy, and you really the extreme sacrifice of your family and time, and so is politics. There can be that kind of that heartbreak, right? Recognizing that it's a sacrifice, that you are going to miss out on things, mm-hmm. and hopefully one day they will think, hey, Dad or Mom were doing this because they loved us and they were concerned about their posterity and the future of us and the future of all. And it of course extremely helpful to have a spouse that shares that vision. In fact, I'd say, look, hey, if your spouse doesn't share this vision and they don't want you to do it, you probably shouldn't do it. Okay, right? Your family and your relationship with God, rather than that reverse order, must come first. Okay, and mm-hmm. So if you find 100%. That you're a churchgoer before you got into it, but then you found that you thought you were too busy, don't do this. Okay, you still got to keep these things a priority, but you got to be creative, right? That it may mean later dinners, or it requires that I get up early and I play with my boys like I did this morning. We all hang out and have fun and do things, or making sure you're at home. The other is, especially if you have young kids, don't be scared to take them with you. All right. I know it can be kind of embarrassing sometimes that you have a baby crying, but get over it. Okay. And if people don't like it, well, then they don't like kids. Right? Just do it. It's part of our society that we've kind of this anti-life thing, that we want children to be just over there and not seen and not heard, and I think that's why so many people feel maybe embarrassed to have their kids around or don't want large families. But come on. In fact, I think they've helped. There'd be a lot of people that really just can't stand me because, I reveal what they're doing in local government or whatever, but they love my wife and kids. and I'll take it. So
Yeah.
it can be a strength, and it depends how you use it. But absolutely, it can be a little heartbreaking sometimes. But at the end of the day, if it's that calling, we've got to do something about it, right? And do it for them, you know.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the things you and your bride have put into place to help protect that sphere you're talking about. I mean, you mentioned getting up earlier and playing with your boys, taking them with you places. I know our friend Matt Krause, state representative and fellow member of the House Freedom Caucus. I've always been really impressed by the way he's prioritized his family and having many kids. There was a time about a year ago, I was inviting him to come and speak at an event that was a pretty big deal, and I was inviting him 9 months in advance. And I emailed him, said, "Hey, Matt, can you come do this?" He's like, "No, man, I got a scheduling conflict." And I was like, what the heck do you have 9 months from now that you can't move by a day or a few hours in order to get to this event? He's like, "Dude, I got family vacation." And he just put down those inviolable markers and said, for his family, "I want to plan this in advance, and I will not move it. It's here. It's going to stay. It doesn't matter. President Trump can call and ask for me to come meet with him, but I'm telling him, sorry, I can't do that." And so setting up small pieces there that are inviolable seem to work very well for him. I'm interested in knowing kind of what you and Burgundy have done to make sure you're keeping those lines sacred.
Yeah, one of them, it may be part and parcel to why we have 4 kids, but we have one TV in the house, and we're good at turning it off. Okay, we sit down and have dinner together. Okay, and the calendar. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I wouldn't have maybe thought about it without you referencing how Representative Krause said going to put something 9 months out, but the calendar. And it actually occasionally would drive my wife nuts that I've got to calendar things, because it's the priority, but it's the only way that I know, and then my staff who sees it realize, hey, today we've got swim lessons or karate or whatever that is,
mm-hmm.
and set aside. The other thing is, this is where I'm really, really blessed that I have a wife who's an activist, right? So she runs a Republican Women's Club, and she goes to the convention and wants to go to the convention as a delegate, whether or not I was going to go. You'd find not many spouses are like that. Sometimes she's more informed on things that are going on in the local party than I am. And so that helps a lot, that she's going some of these things with me, and she's bringing the kids. So that kind of can make up for some of that time. But no, it absolutely requires that you do it. And if you're going to be doing calls, that people get over the fact that maybe they hear kids in the background.
Yeah,
you can do both. I mean, you can be there. It doesn't mean you have to completely shut it off or take no calls, but just kind of get over it. I know some people want to maybe be in a private setting, or if they're going to do this, that they don't want chaos in the background. And I guess I'll easily tell people, hey, I can talk to you right now, but just understand that it's not going to be long. I've got my children, and they're playing in the background. It's okay. So we got to bide that time and do things, right? You can do stuff on the budget. Go spend time, get out of the house, right? Go to the museum, go to the park, build something. Same thing in being a father or a parent. Yeah, being active in their lives.
I like it. Yeah.
Oh, and the other one, the use of technology, right? That is, gosh, I don't know what people have done before this, but now we're able to do things like Skype and FaceTime.
Yeah.
And making sure we stop during session, as you know, and maybe others who watch the live feed or know what's going on, it can be crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that last 60 days. And some people, I think that's kind of what can help destroy marriages and relationships. There's a really high divorce rate of politicians. You've got to know, have I talked to my wife or kids in a few hours? Has it been that long? We're stuck on the floor. Like, no, to get up and go and give them some FaceTime.
Yeah, I
right?
think a lot of it comes back to what you mentioned earlier, as far as having those priorities of God and your marriage first. I know for me that working in politics, I mean, I'm not an elected official, never have been, and probably never will be, but at multiple times, or a lot of times, because I feel like God's called me to work in politics, this is my mission field, there have been a number of times in my life when things have got out of whack because I have an inflated sense of the importance of what I'm doing inside of politics. And that I just get this picture of this is the most important thing I'll ever do. Even if I don't quite phrase it that way mentally, that's how I'm acting. And with having my first son 9 months ago, and with having a wonderful bride that's been with me for, married for 4.5 years, it's been crystallizing for me to be able to look at her and look at him and be like, you know what? It doesn't matter how many senators I help elect or how many podcast downloads I get or what my, political eulogy says someday. These relationships are the most important things I'll ever do. And if I start doing something and living in such a way that I am putting politics, regardless of the results that I generate, above the covenant relationship I have with my wife, above my relationship with God, and above the duties that I have to my children, then I'm not doing things right.
Yeah. And for the listeners, Raz and I aren't discussing this kind of like as a fear tactic to say don't get involved. It is more of a precautionary tale.
Yeah.
And I realize that if you're wanting to do this, you need to put things in place immediately. And if you haven't yet, if you're one of those activists right out there right now, really, that is going, gosh, I've been doing this. I'm going to all these city council meetings, etc. And I realize how it's stressing. Hey, it's still salvageable. Okay, like you get it back in order. But for me, even when I knew I was going to be elected, with spending time with the family aside, I had to think about how do I not become part of the problem, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe we're shifting in another direction on this conversation, but it's one I always enjoy talking about is we go, well, why are you going to be different, right? Or I would think maybe it would violate Hanlon's razor, right? The logical equation would say that it is essentially more likely stupidity than it is malice. Why? Yes. Are they all just that bad, or were there any good ones who were hoping, and what went wrong? Like something went wrong. Did they start out maliciously? Yeah, a lot of them did. We know that, gosh, how majority of that building were people that were handpicked by the lobby, and they were already sold out. But not everybody. And if they go bad, what went wrong, right? And so then to put things in place, systems, fail-safes, accountability partners, transparency that can help us avoid even putting ourselves in that situation.
Yes.
I mean, that one's one of the most important ones. It can be a really, really lonely place for an outsider like us. Thankfully, we have the Freedom Caucus, and so we were able to kind of go to dinner together. But when you're in that Capitol, I can get, and by the way, I never have, but one could. You can have the best bottle of whiskey and a steak lunch and dinner and breakfast every single day, free, if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's learning not to even put yourself in that situation, right? It's not that some will be like, well, I can go and hang out with sinners and not get dirty. No, you really can't. Okay.
Yeah.
You've got to be careful to not allow those things to tempt you. And one of the easiest ones, again, though, is just not getting yourself in the situation. And then two, having these accountability partners, right? And being really transparent. For me, one kind of a unique story and is, I'm really unfiltered, so I'll tell it. Recently, I was, I'm trying to think where I was, but I got a text message that said something like, hey, I got the house all alone, blah, 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 come over with a nude selfie recently. The very moment I got it, I was standing polls for Thomas McNutt, that's what it was. The very moment I got it, I showed the person standing next to me.
Yeah.
It was a guy. And you may go, that's weird. No, that was so that there was never a moment where I thought no one would know.
Yeah.
I screenshot it and sent it to my wife after that immediately. And of course she was like, oh, girl, why would you say, well, so that I don't ever think, right, in the quiet time and no one's around, that, I can get away with it. That's because that's how sin is in our lives, right? Mm-hmm. And so I say that part of that transparency is really important. When someone offers you something or is trying to get you to compromise, to immediately call it out, right? Like I will tell my staff right away what's going on. And then be like, of course, yeah, that's part of politics, but it's actually a safeguard for me.
Yes.
So that I don't think I can get away with it later, because if I did it, they would go, we know what happened. You told us about it. Right? And so it all goes back to that. So we've always got doors open. My door never shuts when there's a woman there, and I make sure that my staff's door is open. And I tell my wife about every time that maybe I feel like something's going weird with another woman in the area or something. And anytime feel like an offer is happening, and eventually though, I have this theory that people don't do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe the reason that the lobby really doesn't bribe me is because they know I would immediately call them out for it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you get this pattern, it's kind of neat. I think a neat result is it stops a little bit.
Yeah, when you start building those systems to help combat temptation, whatever the type is, and this is one of the really important things is to know where you're weak. For some people, it's going to be they're weak in areas of maybe it's that steak or that bourbon that really gets them going. That's their weak point. For some people, it may be lust. You never know what that's going to be. It could be pride and allowing yourself to be flattered too much and put in situations where you shouldn't be as a result of that, getting manipulated that way. You got to know what your individual weaknesses, those besetting sins are, in order to be able to specifically watch out for those. Like you said, to have staff and friends and your spouse be on the lookout for when things may be a little bit off of level. Because one of my favorite quotes from C.S. Lewis was, he said, "Every affair starts with a cup of coffee." And what he was saying there was not that having a cup of coffee with a woman means you're going to end up sleeping with her. What is his idea there is that pretty much every affair out there, it didn't start with the intent, so hey, let's go cheat on our spouses. It started out with, oh, you know what, let's go have coffee, and then it kind of gradually goes from there. They allowed themselves to not recognize or not admit to themselves where it was headed, and then they got in too deep. That's the way a lot of it happens. And part of what you've done to make sure that whether it's talking about sexual morality or whether it's talking about bribery or whatever else it is, you've set those safeguards in place to make sure that it never has that moment for that thought to be private and secret and to grow in that secrecy.
Yeah, in a way it begins kind of maybe with, I wouldn't say maybe arrogance or something, but this belief that you're untouchable, right?
Yeah.
The belief that it can't happen to me and everything's fine. So you got to recognize, and maybe that goes back when I was mentioning Hanlon's Razor, which is like, no, okay, it happens. I'd love to think that some of the guys that are in our government started out great and something went wrong, and they believe the same thing. And so be vigilant and put stuff in place to prevent it.
So let's shift gears to talking about campaigns and how the heck you got elected. All right, so you started out, you ran for office for the first time in 2014. You jumped into you were part of a 7-way primary. Talk about what happened, why you made that shift from activist to running, especially such a crowded field, and kind of how that developed with building the team and being a first-time candidate, all that fun stuff.
So not a lot of people know this one, but while I was living in Seabrook, I'm from Deer Park, and I was in Germany with some work friends. An employer took us out there, and of course, he paid our way, so we're there. My wife is, some of the people are going to roll their eyes. She was, in her 3rd trimester, like a month from delivery or something, and so I guess I was crazy to go out of the country. But so she buys a house in Seabrook, and here we are. And that would have been House District 129. The state representative was John Davis. And I'm kind of becoming this activist at this time, and I'm going, I'm here, and that guy doesn't vote the way I would vote. And so I went and met with him. And he was chairman, a powerful guy. I had one of those, nice fancy offices that are up there on the ground floor. And I told him that I was going to run against him, and he told me if I did, that he would ruin my life. And for those of you that know me now, what do you think I did? So I filed. It was like, are you daring me to do it? Why would you tell me not to do that? So I filed. So I was the first to file. And it turns out that he was actually planning to not run again. And a few others were aware of this. And so it became a 7-way race. Dennis Paul gets into that race. And, gosh, I think I came in 4th place, spent, I think the campaign finance showed something like 30, but a very large portion of that was like an in-kind from someone letting me use an office, right? Mm-hmm. And so I had a lot of learning. It went into a runoff, and I supported Dennis Paul in that runoff because I thought he was a better candidate. And then we moved back to Deer Park. Actually bought my childhood house for my parents. But as to running in a race and losing and having that experience, I think you'll find, I'm sure, Raz, since you probably know the stats better than I do, there's something about that. A lot of people need to recognize that it could be a 2-run thing.
Yeah.
You learn a lot. And sometimes people, and it's needed. It's something you cannot really read about.
No.
As a candidate, to experience, to know what you didn't have and what you need and how much harder you should have worked. I know we kind of recruit candidates and interview them, and we're explaining to them they think they've got the time or they're willing to work that hard. By the way, guys, it is a full-time commitment. Okay. You completely put your life on hold. You are going to make less money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Period. I think when this last race, when I was running against Wayne Smith, my wife would say, I think I made less than $20,000 that year. Thank God she was employed gainfully.
Yeah.
But it requires something like that. It is a full-time gig. And I didn't know that. I didn't know the techniques. I wasn't, I guess, as polished. I didn't know how to raise money. I didn't know how to ask for money. I didn't know how to talk at the doors. These are all techniques I know that you coach and teach people. They are something that is learned and acquired, and I learned it. And so go back to your park, and guess what I did again? Ran against an incumbent. This time, this one was not retiring, and we won.
There you go.
By a narrow margin in a runoff, but we won.
Yeah. How many votes was that?
23. Now, the unique story for the political nerds out there is Wayne Smith won in a runoff in would have been, I guess, like 2002-ish era whenever he went in. He won in his runoff by 24 votes.
That's pretty funny.
And then lost in a runoff by 23 14 years later.
Man. Yeah, when you talk about that, what you learned in that first race, a number of your fellows in the House Freedom Caucus, people that I've worked with for years, were in that same boat. My favorite example of that's Matt Krause, who came through some of the training and coaching stuff that I did back in, it would have been 09 and 10. And when he walked in that morning to our training, he was going to run for Congress, and he was confident he was going to win. And when he walked out that day, I told him, look, dude, don't run for Congress, run for state rep. You're going to lose your first race, but you're going to come back a second time, and you'll be able to run and win. And I don't know why he ever talked to me again after that, because that's definitely not what he wanted to hear. But Matt is a very humble man. He works really hard, and I think that he just kind of looked at what we said and said, that makes sense. And he attacked that first race with tenacity. He did his best. He learned an incredible amount. And the beautiful thing about that second race is on the first one, you're starting from zero experience, 0 donors, 0 volunteers. You're starting from zero in all areas. But when you go into that second race, especially if you've kept things alive during the off cycle and been involved or had that activist side and network that you had, Briscoe, you're starting from a significant advantage. And that's what allows you to go in, and just like Matt did, beat an incumbent by a narrow margin.
Yeah. Well, in grassroots campaigns, you kind of mentioned that, coming from the activist side, people were wondering, why won't these people volunteer for me or help me? That requires trust, right? These volunteers, these activists, that's their time. And part of that maybe is that they need to see that you're real. Mm-hmm. And it's it's not an insult to you, but if you haven't been in the movement and been around for a long time, they believe that you believe that you're going to do what you said you're going to do. Yeah. But I think they need to see it. And
they've been betrayed so many times.
To be really visible. Exactly.
We're talking about people that are gun shy at a certain level, because they've heard, everybody throws out, as far as Republican politics, is the same on the Democrat side for their people a lot of times. But the talking points are the same, the websites are the same. Everybody talks about being a grassroots conservative, this or that, even if you're the furthest thing from it. So sorting the wheat from the chaff is difficult. And in Texas, we have a whole lot of races that are up every election cycle. And so no matter where I live, there's probably a number of really great candidates that are running in my municipality, my state house district, all the way up and down the ballot. I've got more than one option as far as who I'm going to work for. And I got to decide, am I going to split my effort or am I going all in, whole hog for one guy? And those are hard decisions. And you got to realize as a candidate that if you don't make it really, really easy for them to see how their investment is going to pay off big, then they may go with somebody else.
Yeah, and it's not easy, right?
No.
I think it was Jonathan Stickland that made this comment kind of recently. It's no surprise. I mean, we got our butts kicked in the primaries, okay, with our candidates. Now, we didn't. All Freedom Caucus members are coming back, and we're growing the caucus, okay? And overall, we actually had a bunch of wins. If you're following Twitter, which as many of you know, and if you didn't know this, by the way, Twitter is not a reflection of the general voting population, okay? And neither is Facebook. So all that hatred is actually not a reflection of the voters. So don't believe the hype. Usually those trolls and people are yelling at you and saying, I'm your constituent, why aren't you doing this? When you look them up, guess what? They don't vote, and they're not even registered. It's a dirty secret. But I say that, though, is they campaign like us. They all pledge to, cut spending and vote against these things and property tax caps and abolish abortion and gun rights, blah, blah. So guess what? If they go up there and govern the way they campaign, we are going to have the best session ever. But it said that's kind of why, like you said, these activists can get gun shy. And look, it takes time, and it's relationship building, and for people to really get to know you. I see that a lot, though. We'll have someone kind of pop up, they become an activist, and oftentimes you probably have seen this. It'll be that first year they get involved, they start attending the Tea Party meetings or come to the local Republican things, and it looks suspicious because they also at the same time want to run, and so it looks like, well, the reason you're now coming to our clubs because you were planning to run the whole time. And so, guys, if that's been you, and you're struggling to get that support, just take a breath and get to know these people, okay? Because it does require grassroots support, unless you want to be sold off and bought off by the lobby. If that's you, please stop listening now.
Yeah, don't take anything we're saying to heart. Well, with what you did in your background in being within the movement, and people like Connie Burton, who had been working and supporting candidates for years prior to actually running herself, and very similar to what you did, there was a street cred and a trust that the folks had of y'all, the activists had of y'all, the grassroots supporters did, because they knew your resume. They'd been seeing you to these meetings. They knew that, these people have been in the trenches with you before. And so when you're picking between all these candidates, it's like, I know there's something special about Connie. I know there's something special about Briscoe because I've got to know them through years in the trenches. And so they're going to be more likely to want to help you. Now, there are other folks, like in Matt Krause's case, he had been active some degree within the party, but he had not been a long-term activist. He was young. He wasn't even in his 30s yet at that point, I don't think.
Now, some people didn't know that about Matt, though. Matt was an activist attorney.
Correct, but he was not. So he was active, but he wasn't somebody that the local Republican club or Tea Party or something like that, they would have had no idea who he was. Although his resume and through his actions in the legal side, he was having a big impact.
Exactly. That's a great point, Raz. And just I do want to clarify that one of the things you often hear if you're wanting to run, let's say you're wanting to run for state rep, or which great, please do. People say, yeah, but you never ran for city council or something. You got to rate your turn, or these other people have been elected. That's nonsense. Okay, so go for it. And even if it's something like, if you're wanting to run for city council, which please, Republicans, please invade local government. We're begging you to run for these seats. They are not less than. If anything, they're extremely important. I wish I had learned how important they were until I got elected to see really, really how powerful these things are. They affect your lives, okay? So we're not saying to wait your turn, but, hey, build those relationships. It's about trust, and which comes from, by the way, that non-elected activism we were talking about in the beginning. Go do something so people see that you are what you say you are, right? Like, if you want us to vote for you in an election because you believe these things, well, what have you done before you ran that proves to me that you really believe it?
Yeah. Yeah, if I see somebody who they're running for office, I've never seen any evidence of them being active. Maybe they even haven't been voting regularly in the past. And they're telling me that they've just recently they just woke up to this idea that government's important, that we need to have good elected officials. I have a lot more questions for them.
Yeah, well, I want to I want to Google, or look at Transparency Texas or something. I mean, look, if you tell me you're pro-life, blah, 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 well, have you ever given to a crisis pregnancy center? I mean, you don't have to attend the Texas Direct Life annual banquet, but I mean, have you done something? I mean, do you like occasionally drop diapers off? I mean, what do you really do that proves to me that it's not just something you feel? Because if you're going to go and vote, the only way I know you're going to vote right is when I know that this thing is really, really real to you. And when you really believe an issue, you're compelled to action. And it doesn't mean entering government sometimes. It literally means that you're compelled to do something about it. Yeah. That you actually have a record of showing up to local elections and voting. That maybe you show up to these meetings, that you put yard signs in yards, and that you donate to candidates. By the way, you can just do $5. It's okay. But that shows me that you really believed it before you ran for something.
Mm-hmm. And once again, as Briscoe said, this doesn't come back to waiting your turn or checking some boxes or paying your dues. This is all focused on how do you build trust and show people that they're going to get what they're signing up for if they vote for you or they volunteer for you. So as we're kind of getting towards the end here, let's look at the actual campaigns. As you were, you're running your first campaign, you learned a whole lot there. You leverage that to come back and win a narrow victory in the runoff in your second campaign. What are some of those lessons that sitting here talking to a bunch of candidates and campaign staff, you most want them to pick up and say, if you do these couple things, it's going to transform the way you run your campaign or at least your chances to win?
Well, the most important thing in a campaign, and look, you've got there's some software, little known software. Actually, of course, it's not little known. Some software that you and your brother work on, but the game is on the ground. It is knocking on doors. It is so extremely uncomfortable, maybe for a first timer, but it is knocking on doors. There is nothing that can supplement it. There is no amount of phone calls or other people knocking on doors, as you and I know, and as you've explained to people. And I find candidates, and I say that I find candidates because I've did it myself. You come up with all kinds of excuses, other reasons not to go knock on somebody's door.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, I'm going to go to this Rotary Club thing. No, you need to go knock on doors. Go knock on doors. Go knock on doors.
Yeah, everybody I have on here, we're talking about block walking, canvassing, getting out there and talking to people, because there's the benefit of the voter contact, but there's a whole lot of benefit that you as a candidate derive from that. You're practicing your elevator pitch in the core of your stump speech every single time somebody opens the door. You're learning how to engage with people in non-confrontational, non-argumentative ways, and you never know what's going to happen. So it's always, it's kind of like the life's like a box of chocolates idea. When you're going down knocking the street of voters, you don't know what's going to happen, but you get to practice putting yourself in situations that you could not predict over and over and over again. And what does that do? It makes you so much better at communication of every type.
Yep, that's it. And it just comes from practice and getting the jitters off. People are always worried about whether or not they're going to say something correctly. By the way, when you walk away from that door, they're not going to remember what you said.
No.
Really, the one thing I would say is they're going to remember whether or not they pledged to you something, right? And I'm sure you've talked about before is when people will ask for a vote, they may say something like, "I hope I can count on your vote." And when I'm talking to candidates, I'm like, "Yeah, I hope they can too." I mean, just literally, can I count on your vote? Yes or no, right? Get a yes or no. I think they remember that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Because when the next person comes along, whatever that mail piece that may have come out, they're like, "No, I gave that guy my word."
Mm-hmm. And that helps.
They may remember.
And then you also want to make sure that they walk away, or when you walk away, that they remember having a pleasant experience. If I have two things that I want somebody to have when I walk away, I want them to have a positive encounter associated with my name, and I want them to have given some kind of commitment to further interaction, whether it's vote or yard sign or checking out my website or just some kind of future contact. If I have those two things, then I'm in a really good spot for persuading them in the future and hopefully turn them out to vote. But if you don't have somebody that likes you when you walk away, if you have a negative one, or you walk away and they're like, Briscoe, he's all right.
Yeah, what we're looking
that's
for
a lost
is
opportunity.
when they reflect on the conversation they just had with you that it was pleasant. And so again, if you're worried about what you're saying, it's not as important as the person just going, that was a really pleasant young lady. I like her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So don't be too nervous about that. It's mostly about you showing up that impresses people that you knocked on their door.
Yeah, they really get to, in a few seconds, make a read on your character and whether or not you're somebody they really like. And if they like you and they don't remember something really awful about you, when they go into the voting booth and they're looking at a list of names, most of which they never had interaction with, most of which they've only seen mail from, the guy they've had some positive interaction with and liked is probably going to get their vote.
There you go.
So Briscoe, I know you got to run here in a second. What are some final thoughts for folks that are looking to run for office, or folks that are helping out on campaigns this election cycle?
So kind of my final thoughts on what's going on right now is, of course, we've got November coming up right around the corner. We've got Beto O'Rourke, by the way, who is going to lose to Ted Cruz, but not by the margins many of us would like. Okay, I would say at a maximum maybe 7%. To 5 or 6, and I don't know what your opinion on that, Raz, is, but therefore, a lot of people are kind of we're overly cocky right now as Republicans. Okay,
yes.
So we got Trump in the White House, and people kind of just calm down, and we're used to being red. We don't lose any statewide office. Okay, but they are working incredibly hard, and Beto's turnout game is going to be impressive. It is going to be impressive. If you've seen those text messages and stuff they're seeing around, you as a Republican may think it's silly. It is absolutely brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're identifying voters, and they're going to be turning those guys out long enough in advance for them to then, if they're not even registered to vote, they're going to get them registered to vote. And so this is a call to action, okay? If you think that the top of the ticket are the only things that matter and therefore we're safe, please stop. Like, it's not, okay? We've got judiciary at our district court levels, even some of those just the peace courts that you may not think matter. Oh, gosh, they matter, okay?
Yeah.
And the state house seats and our locals. Again, I have to remind myself of why those matter, okay? And there's a lot of locals that are coming up in November that are quote-unquote nonpartisan, but, dude, that is where the money is. There is a reason Texas is ranked second highest in local debt per capita.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because we're not showing up, guys. And so not just showing up to vote, though, but find that candidate and do something to help them in November. I know it's not as fun as a primary. A lot of us activists, we love that primary fight, right? It's just great. And we're not used to having to go after Democrats, but we need to. Even if you're in a safe seat, let's say you've got a House seat that's 70% or so. And I really, actually, I wish I had an opponent. Democrats, if any of you are listening, please, why did you not run somebody against me? It would give me a chance to get out and campaign. We've got to go and still show up. All right. So even if it's a safe seat, why not increase those margins? Why not identify new voters and turn them into Republicans? Okay. And instead of us getting into a crisis situation where they're close races and then we finally activate, let's win by a lot, no matter what that area is, And so get involved, go knock some doors. Look, right now, whoever that local guy is, go to their website and give them $5. Okay, just $5. Like, do without lunch today. All right, bring a sack lunch tomorrow. But do something. It's turning the talk into action that we need. The same thing that's how I got involved, which is we believe it. And if you really believe it, you're going to do something about it. It is going to reflect in your life. There's going to be fruit on the tree. So I'm encouraging you guys to do it.
Right on, Representative. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I will be linking to your social media and more information about you and what you've been up to in the show notes and on our website. I really appreciate the fight that you're taking to Austin and the great job you're doing of being, husband and a dad and a representative and an activist all at the same time. So it's really it's great to get to know you over the last couple of years, and I'm excited about a lot more fun and hijinks. Actually, before we go on the subject of hijinks, you recently got featured even in some national news for a fun little prank you and Aaron Harris pulled at the Texas Democrat Convention. You want to give us a quick rundown on that as we're heading out the door?
That idea just kind of popped in my head, and thank God for Aaron Harris. I wish you were there, man. I'm sorry you were busy that day, but that was awesome. And what was most amazing, it was unpredictable. We didn't really know what was going to happen. I mean, I knew people would like it. I was thinking maybe there would be some more mob stuff, or that people would kind of catch on quicker than they really did. But they loved it. I mean, really, and if you've seen the video, when Aaron Harris says the only time he got yelled at was when we ran out, that is 100% true.
Well, you guys had signs that were it said this home is a gun-free zone with a gun and the overlay, the no sign. You were handing these out at the Democrat State Convention here in Fort Worth, Texas, and they went like hotcakes.
Amazing. People loved it. It just pure shirt. There was one time, just transparent. There was one time where it was given to someone, and the man says, "This is a bad idea." I'm like, that's correct. He said, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "Well, are you in favor of gun storage laws?" He says, "Yes." He said, "That's the same thing."
Yeah.
And it's kind of, hopefully, maybe got the point. This is, yes, it was satire, but they loved it. They loved it. We kind of finally got caught though, when Pancho Navarez, the state rep, and Gina Hinojosa, who's a freshman who her father is the chairman of the Texas Democrat Party, saw us and then kind of threw us out. And thankfully, we didn't get arrested. I thought we were going to for a while there. By the way, we did not do anything wrong, people. We were in a area we were allowed to be, but they didn't like it. So.
See, guys, being a state rep, being involved in politics is not always being stuffy and wearing a suit and having to make long speeches. Sometimes you can have fun.
Yeah, that's it, man.
All right, Briscoe, you have a wonderful day. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you. Later, Red.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from my campaign coach.